Lieutenant Sarah Matthews adjusted her ceremonial helmet as she prepared for the morning patrol through Hyde Park. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the early sunlight filtered through the ancient oak trees that lined the riding paths. At 29, Sarah had been a member of the household cavalry for 8 years. But her partnership with Thunder, her magnificent black stallion, was still relatively new. Thunder was no ordinary horse, standing 17 hands high with a glossy coat that shimmered in the sunlight. He possessed an intelligence and sensitivity that had impressed even the most experienced cavalry officers. The 10-year-old stallion had been rescued from neglect as a young colt and trained specifically for ceremonial duties, but his natural instincts remained sharp and alert as they began their patrol. Sarah noticed the unusual quiet in the park. Most mornings brought joggers, dog walkers, and early commuters cutting through on their way to work, but today the path seemed almost deserted. The weather forecast had predicted rain later, which might have discouraged some of the regular park visitors. Thunder's ears pricked forward as they approached the serpentine lake, his nostrils flaring slightly as he tested the air. Sarah had learned to trust her horse's instincts completely. Thunder often sensed things long before she became aware of them. His training had taught him to be alert for anything unusual or potentially dangerous. Near the lake's edge, a woman sat alone on a bench, her shoulders hunched against the morning chill. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with long brown hair that fell across her face as she stared down at her hands. Something about her posture suggested distress, and Sarah guided Thunder closer to check if the woman needed assistance. "Good morning," Sarah called out gently as they approached. "Are you all right, miss?" The woman looked up, revealing tear-stained cheeks and eyes filled with worry. She was clearly pregnant, probably in her 7th or 8th month, and her breathing seemed somewhat labored. "Oh, hello, officer," she replied, trying to compose herself. "I'm fine, just thinking about things." Sarah dismounted gracefully, leaving Thunder's reins loose as she had been trained. The stallion stood perfectly still, but his dark eyes remained fixed on the pregnant woman with an intensity that Sarah found unusual. Thunder typically showed polite interest in civilians, but this was different, more focused and alert. "Lieutenant Matthews with the household cavalry," Sarah said warmly. "This is Thunder. You patrol the park regularly, and I wanted to make sure you were okay. You seem upset about something." The woman's name was Emma Clark, and as her story unfolded, Sarah understood why she appeared so distressed. Emma was 8 months pregnant with her first child, but her boyfriend had abandoned her the previous week, leaving her alone and frightened about the future. She had come to the park to think, but the stress was overwhelming. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Emma confided, fresh tears starting to flow. "I have no family nearby, limited savings, and now I'm completely alone with the baby coming in. Just a few weeks. I came here because I needed somewhere quiet to figure out my next steps." Thunder stepped closer to the bench, lowering his massive head toward Emma with surprising gentleness. The stallion's usual formal bearing seemed to soften, as he sensed the woman's emotional pain. Sarah watched in amazement as her normally reserved horse showed such obvious concern for a stranger. "Thunder likes you," Sarah observed, reaching out to pat her horse's neck. "He's usually much more aloof with civilians. He seems to sense that you're going through a difficult time." Emma reached out tentatively to touch Thunder's velvet nose. The horse remained perfectly still, allowing the contact. For a moment, her worried expression softened as she experienced the calming presence of the gentle giant. "He's beautiful," Emma whispered. "I've always loved horses, but I haven't been around them since I was a child. There's something so peaceful about being near him." As they talked, Sarah noticed that Emma's breathing was becoming more irregular, and she seemed to be experiencing some discomfort. The pregnant woman shifted positions on the bench several times, wincing occasionally and placing her hand on her lower back. Thunder's behavior became increasingly agitated. The stallion's ears swiveled constantly, and he began pawing the ground softly, behaviors that Sarah recognized as signs of anxiety or alertness to potential danger. Something was making her horse nervous, but she couldn't identify what it might be. "Emma, are you feeling all right physically?" Sarah asked with growing concern. "You seem to be in some discomfort." Emma tried to wave off the concern, but another wave of pain crossed her face. I've been having some back pain and cramping since yesterday, but I thought it was just normal pregnancy discomfort. The stress probably isn't helping." Thunder suddenly whinnied softly and moved even closer to Emma, his large body positioned protectively beside the bench. Sarah had never seen her horse behave this way before. It was as if Thunder sensed something that she couldn't yet perceive. Thunder's restless behavior intensified as the minutes passed. The stallion began circling the bench in tight patterns, never straying far from Emma, but clearly agitated about something. Situation. But today his instincts were overriding his discipline. Sarah watched her horse with growing confusion and concern. Thunder's nostrils flared repeatedly as he tested the air, and his tail swished nervously. The stallion kept returning to Emma's side, gently nudging her shoulder with his nose as if trying to communicate something urgent. "Thunder, easy boy," Sarah murmured, trying to understand what was causing her horse's unusual behavior. "What's got you so worked up?" Emma doubled over suddenly, gasping as a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. The intensity caught her completely off guard, and she gripped the bench's armrest tightly as the contraction built and then slowly subsided. When she looked up, her face was pale with shock and fear. "Oh no," Emma whispered, the reality of her situation beginning to dawn on her. It wasn't just back pain. I think those might be contractions. Sarah knelt beside the bench, her cavalry training kicking in as she assessed the emergency situation developing before her. "How long have you been having these pains, Emma? How far apart are they?" Emma tried to remember when the discomfort had started, since yesterday evening, but they were mild then. "I thought it was just stress, but they've been getting stronger. This morning and now." Another contraction began building, stronger than the first. Thunder positioned himself directly in front of Emma, as if shielding her from some invisible threat. His ears were pinned forward, and every muscle in his powerful body was tense with alertness. The stallion's behavior was so unusual that Sarah began to wonder if he was sensing something about Emma's condition that she wasn't yet aware of. "We need to get you to a hospital immediately," Sarah said, reaching for her radio to call for emergency medical assistance. But as she raised the device to her lips, Emma grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "Something's wrong," Emma gasped, her voice filled with panic. "This doesn't feel right. The pain is different than what I expected, and theirs." She looked. Down at the bench beneath her, both women saw the alarming sight of blood beginning to stain her clothing. Thunder whinnied sharply and pawed the ground, his agitation reaching a peak. The intelligent stallion seemed to understand that this was a medical emergency requiring immediate action. Without any command from Sarah, Thunder moved to Emma's left side and stood perfectly still, as if offering himself as support. Sarah's training in emergency first aid took over as she quickly assessed the situation. Emma was showing signs of possible placental abruption or other serious pregnancy complications that required immediate medical intervention. They were in a relatively isolated part of the park, and an ambulance might take precious minutes to reach them. "Emma, I need you to listen to me carefully," Sarah said, her voice calm but urgent. "We're going to get you help right away, but I think you might be experiencing a pregnancy emergency. Can you stand with Thunder's help?" Emma nodded weakly, still gripping the bench as another contraction overwhelmed her. The bleeding was becoming more noticeable, and her face was growing paler by the minute. Thunder seemed to sense her distress and moved even closer, allowing Emma to steady herself against his solid shoulder. "Good boy, Thunder," Sarah praised. Her horse, while simultaneously calling emergency services on her radio. "Emergency dispatch, this is Lieutenant Matthews, Household Cavalry, in Hyde Park near the Serpentine. I have a pregnant woman in active labor with signs of complications. We need immediate medical assistance." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio, confirming that an ambulance was being dispatched, but warning that it might take 15 to 20 minutes to navigate through morning traffic to reach their location in the park. Emma's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her contractions were now coming every few minutes, and the bleeding was increasing. Sarah realized that they might not have 15 minutes to wait for professional medical help to arrive. Thunder seemed to understand the urgency of the situation in ways that defied explanation. The stallion positioned himself so that Emma could lean against him fully, providing a stable support system while Sarah worked to keep her conscious and alert. "Emma, stay with me," Sarah urged, monitoring her pulse and breathing. "Help is coming, but we need to keep you stable until they arrive." But even as she spoke, Sarah could see that Emma's condition was becoming critical. The young woman's eyes were beginning to lose focus, and her grip on Thunder's mane was weakening. Whatever was happening with her pregnancy was progressing faster than anyone had anticipated. Thunder suddenly lifted his head and whinnied loudly. Not the gentle sounds he had been making, but a sharp, urgent call that echoed across the park. It was as if the stallion was calling for help on behalf of this woman who couldn't call for herself. Thunder's urgent whinnying carried across the park with such intensity that it attracted the attention of other early morning visitors. A jogger in the distance stopped and looked toward the sound, while a dog walker changed direction to investigate. The commotion coming from near the lake, Emma's condition continued to worsen. She was now barely conscious, her head resting against Thunder's strong neck as the stallion stood like a living pillar supporting her weight. Sarah could see that they were facing a life-threatening emergency that required immediate action.
"Thunder."
"We need to move her," Sarah said to her horse, knowing that the intelligent animal would understand her tone, if not her words. "Can you help me get her to a better position?" The stallion seemed to comprehend exactly what was needed. Thunder carefully adjusted his position, allowing Sarah to help Emma slide down from the bench so that she was sitting on the grass with her back supported against the horse's front legs. The stallion remained perfectly motionless, creating a living backrest for the distressed woman. A middle-aged man jogging nearby heard Thunder's calls and approached cautiously. "Officer, is everything all right? That horse sounds distressed, and I thought I should check if you need assistance." "Sir, we have a medical emergency," Sarah called out gratefully. "This woman is having pregnancy complications, and we're waiting for an ambulance. Can you help me keep her awake and alert?" The jogger, who introduced himself as Dr. Peter Richardson, immediately knelt beside Emma. "I'm a general practitioner," he explained quickly. "What symptoms has she been experiencing?" Sarah rapidly briefed Dr. Richardson on Emma's condition. While Thunder continued to provide steady support, the horse's body warmth was helping to keep Emma from going into shock, and his calm breathing seemed to have a stabilizing effect on her vital signs. "This looks like placental abruption," Dr. Richardson confirmed Sarah's fears. "We need to keep her stable and monitor her carefully until the paramedics arrive. The bleeding suggests that both mother and baby are at risk." Thunder's ears suddenly perked up, and he turned his head toward the park's main entrance. His acute hearing had detected the sound of sirens long before the humans could hear them. The stallion whinnied once more, but this time the sound carried a different tone. Less urgent, more hopeful. "I think Thunder hears the ambulance coming," Sarah observed, amazed by her horse's sensory abilities. "He's been incredible through all of this, providing exactly the support Emma needed." Dr. Richardson continued monitoring Emma's pulse and breathing while praising Thunder's behavior. "I've never seen a horse respond to a medical emergency with such appropriate instincts. It's almost like he understood exactly what was happening and knew how to help." Emma stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open as she became aware of the activity around her. "My baby," she whispered weakly. "Is my baby going to be okay?" "Emma, you're both going to get excellent medical care," Sarah assured her, gently stroking her hair. "Thunder has been taking care of you, and Dr. Richardson is here to help. The ambulance will be here any minute." The sound of sirens grew louder, and Thunder's posture shifted slightly as he prepared for the arrival of new people. His training had taught him to remain calm around emergency vehicles, but his protective instincts toward Emma seemed to override his usual protocols. To paramedics arrived with their equipment, immediately assessing Emma's condition while marveling at the unusual scene. They had responded to countless emergency calls, but never one where a horse was providing medical support to a patient. "Ma'am, we're going to take excellent care of you and your baby," the lead paramedic assured Emma as they prepared to transfer her to a stretcher. "Your horse friend here has done an amazing job keeping you stable." Thunder was reluctant to move away from Emma as the paramedics worked. The stallion kept trying to position himself where he could continue providing support. clearly unwilling to abandon his patient to strangers. Sarah had to use gentle commands and reassurance to convince her horse that the medical professionals would take proper care of Emma. "Thunder, you've been the best partner anyone could ask for," Sarah told her horse as they prepared to step back. "You've probably saved both their lives by keeping Emma calm and stable until help arrived." Dr. Richardson stayed to assist the paramedics as they prepared Emma for transport. "Officer Matthews, your horse's behavior today was extraordinary. I've practiced medicine for 25 years, and I've never seen an animal display such appropriate medical instincts." As the paramedics loaded Emma onto the stretcher, she reached out weakly toward Thunder. "Thank you," she whispered to the stallion, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "You and Lieutenant Matthews saved us." Thunder stretched his neck forward to gently touch Emma's outstretched hand with his nose. A final gesture of comfort before she was taken to the ambulance. The stallion's dark eyes seemed to convey understanding and reassurance, as if he knew that his job was complete and she would be safe now. The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle began its urgent journey to the hospital, carrying Emma and her unborn child toward the medical care they desperately needed. Thunder watched the departure with alert attention, his ears following the sound of the sirens until they faded into the distance. After the ambulance disappeared from view, Thunder remained unusually quiet and subdued. The stallion stood perfectly still, staring in the direction the vehicle had gone, as if he was still concerned about Emma and her baby. Sarah had never seen her horse display such obvious emotional attachment to a stranger. Dr. Richardson stayed behind to provide his contact information and witness. A statement about the emergency. "Lieutenant Matthews, I want you to understand how remarkable what just happened here was. Your horse demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to detect and respond to a medical crisis." Sarah patted Thunder's neck gently, still amazed by her partner's behavior. "I've heard that horses can sense things humans can't, but I never imagined Thunder would react so protectively to someone he'd just met. It was like he knew Emma was in danger before any of us realized how serious her condition was." Animals often have heightened senses that allow them to detect changes in human physiology, Dr. Richardson explained. Thunder may have sensed chemical changes in Emma's scent that indicated the pregnancy complications, or picked up on subtle changes in her breathing and heart rate that we couldn't perceive. As they talked, other park visitors who had witnessed parts of the emergency began approaching with questions and expressions of amazement. Word was already spreading about the Royal Guard's horse who had helped save a pregnant woman's life. Sarah's radio crackled with a call from her commanding officer, who had been monitoring the emergency response. "Lieutenant Matthews, please report your status and return to base for debriefing when the situation is resolved." "Sir, the medical emergency has been handled successfully," Sarah responded. "The civilian has been transported to hospital, and we're prepared to return to base. However, I should note that Thunder's behavior during this incident was exceptional and deserves recognition." Thunder finally began to relax as the immediate crisis passed, but he remained more alert than usual as they prepared to continue their patrol. The stallion kept looking back toward the path the ambulance had taken, as if he was still worried about Emma's welfare. An elderly woman who had been walking her dog approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Officer, I saw what your horse did for that poor girl. In 50 years of visiting this park, I've never seen anything so beautiful." He knew she was in trouble before anyone else did. The story was already beginning to take on a life of its own as witnesses shared their accounts of Thunder's heroic behavior. Several people had recorded portions of the incident on their phones, and the footage was starting to appear on social media with captions praising the hero horse of Hyde Park. Sarah decided to make a quick detour to the hospital before returning to base, hoping to check on Emma's condition and provide Thunder with closure about the woman he had worked so hard to protect. The stallion seemed to sense their destination and moved with eager purpose toward the hospital at St. Mary's Hospital. Sarah was able to speak with one of the emergency room doctors who had treated Emma. "Lieutenant, I wanted to thank you personally for your quick response this morning, Mrs. Clark. Arrived just in time. She was experiencing a severe placental abruption that could have been fatal for both mother and baby. If she hadn't received immediate medical attention, The news filled Sarah with relief and pride in her horse's instincts. "Doctor, how are they doing now?" Thunder seemed to form a real attachment to Emma, and I think he'd be comforted to know she's safe. "Both mother and baby are stable now, though it will be a few more weeks before the baby is ready for delivery. Mrs. Clark specifically asked me to thank you and Thunder for saving their lives. She said your horse somehow knew she was in danger." Before she did, Thunder seemed to understand the positive news in the doctor's tone, even if he couldn't comprehend the words. The stallion's posture relaxed for the first time since the morning's emergency, and his usual calm demeanor began to return. As they prepared to leave the hospital, a nurse approached with a message from Emma. "Lieutenant Matthews, Mrs. Clark. Wanted me to give you this note. Wanted it while she was feeling better this afternoon." Sarah opened the handwritten note and read it aloud to Thunder. "Dear Lieutenant Matthews and Thunder, I will never be able to adequately thank you for what you did today. Thunder somehow knew I was in serious trouble before I realized it myself, and his care and protection saved both my life and my baby's life. Please give him extra treats and tell him that baby Clark will grow up hearing stories about the hero horse who helped bring them safely into the world. With eternal gratitude, Emma Clark." Thunder's ears perked forward as Sarah read the note, and the stallion whinnied softly, as if he understood that the message was about him and Emma. For the first time since the morning's events, Thunder seemed completely at peace with the outcome. The journey back to the cavalry barracks was quiet and reflective. Sarah found herself thinking about the extraordinary bond that had formed between her horse and a stranger in crisis, and how Thunder's natural instincts had overcome his training to provide exactly the kind of help that was needed. At the barracks, news of Thunder's heroic actions had already spread through the cavalry ranks. Fellow officers and their horses gathered around to hear first-hand accounts of the morning's events, with many expressing amazement at Thunder's apparently intuitive understanding of the medical emergency. Colonel James Whitfield, commanding officer of the Household Cavalry, requested a private meeting with Sarah to discuss Thunder's extraordinary actions. The colonel had served with cavalry units for 30 years and had witnessed countless examples of the remarkable bond between horses and riders, but Thunder's behavior that morning was unlike anything in his experience. "Lieutenant Matthews," Colonel Whitfield began, "I've read Dr. Richardson's statement about this morning's incident, and I've spoken with the hospital staff who treated Mrs. Clark. Everyone agrees that Thunder's actions were instrumental in saving 2 lives today." Sarah stood at attention beside Thunder, who had been specially groomed for this meeting. The stallion seemed to sense the importance of the occasion and stood with perfect military bearing, though his eyes remained alert and intelligent. "Sir Thunder's behavior was remarkable," Sarah confirmed. "He detected Emma's medical emergency before any of us realized how serious her condition was. His protective instincts and gentle support kept her stable until professional help arrived." Colonel walked around Thunder, examining the stallion with the expert eye of someone who had worked with military horses his entire career. "Lieutenant, what you're describing goes beyond normal equine behavior, even for horses with Thunder's level of training. This suggests an almost supernatural level of sensitivity and intelligence." Thunder accepted the colonel's inspection calmly, but his attention kept drifting toward the window that faced in the direction of the hospital. Even hours after the incident, the stallion seemed to be thinking about Emma and wondering about her welfare. "Colonel, I believe Thunder formed a genuine, emotional connection with Emma," Sarah observed. "He's been unusually quiet since we returned, almost like he's worried about her recovery." Within days, Thunder's story had captured the attention of national media outlets. News reporters arrived at the barracks requesting interviews, and social media was filled with posts praising the miracle horse who had saved a mother and baby. The hashtag Thunder the Hero was trending across multiple platforms. Sarah found herself thrust into an unfamiliar spotlight, as journalists wanted to hear first-hand accounts of Thunder's heroic actions. During one television interview, she emphasized that Thunder's behavior represented the best qualities of all military horses: loyalty, intelligence, and an instinctive desire to protect those in need. "Thunder isn't seeking fame or recognition," Sarah explained to reporters. "He's a service animal who saw someone in distress and responded with compassion and protection. That's what good horses do. They take care of people who need help." The royal family took notice of Thunder's actions, and word came down through official channels that His Majesty the King had personally expressed appreciation for the stallion's service. Plans were being made for Thunder to receive special recognition. During the next ceremonial parade, Emma, now stable and recovering well, sent regular updates about her progress to Sarah and Thunder through the hospital staff. She had started a journal documenting her pregnancy journey, with several entries dedicated to the morning when Thunder had saved her life. 3 weeks after the incident, Emma was granted permission to visit Thunder at the cavalry barracks. She was accompanied by medical staff and moved carefully due to her ongoing pregnancy. But her determination to thank Thunder personally was unwavering. Thunder's reaction to seeing Emma again was immediate and touching. The stallion whinnied with apparent joy and approached her slowly, as if he remembered her condition and wanted to be gentle. Emma reached out to touch his nose, and both woman and horse seemed to find comfort in the reunion. "Thunder, my sweet guardian angel," Emma said softly, tears streaming down her face. "Because of you, my baby will have a chance to grow up healthy and loved. I'll never forget what you did for us." The stallion stood perfectly still while Emma spoke, his dark eyes focused on her face as if he understood every word. Several observers noted that Thunder seemed calmer and more content after seeing Emma healthy and recovering. Dr. Richardson, who had assisted during the emergency, also visited to see Thunder and provide a medical perspective on the stallion's actions. "Lieutenant Matthews, I've been researching equine sensory capabilities since that morning in the park. Thunder likely detected chemical changes associated with Emma's pregnancy complications through his sense of smell, possibly hours before she experienced obvious symptoms." The veterinary staff at the barracks conducted their own examination of Thunder, looking for any physical factors that might explain his extraordinary sensitivity. What they found was a remarkably healthy horse with no unusual anatomical features, suggesting that his heroic actions had been driven by intelligence and empathy rather than enhanced physical senses. "Thunder is a normal horse physically," the senior veterinarian reported to Colonel Whitfield. "What made the difference was his emotional intelligence and his bond with Lieutenant Matthews, which gave him the confidence to act on his instincts when he sensed danger." Awards and recognition continued to pour in from various organizations. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals announced that Thunder would receive their highest honor for animal heroism, while veterinary schools requested permission to study his case for educational purposes. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from Emma herself, who announced that she planned to name her son Thomas after Thunder and that she hoped to bring the child to meet his equine namesake after he was born. The gesture touched everyone at the cavalry barracks, especially Sarah, realized that Thunder's actions would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. 2 months later, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy at St. Mary's Hospital. True to her promise, she named him Thomas Thunder Clark, ensuring that her son would carry the name of his four-legged guardian throughout his life. The birth went smoothly, with no complications, and both mother and baby were declared perfectly healthy. Sarah received the news through official channels and immediately shared it with Thunder during their morning grooming session. The stallion's ears perked up at the mention of Emma's name, and he seemed to sense that the news was positive. His tail swished contentedly as Sarah described how well both Emma and baby Thomas were doing. 3 weeks after the birth, Emma was given special permission to bring baby Thomas to the cavalry barracks for a visit. The event was carefully coordinated with military officials, medical staff, and media representatives who wanted to document the reunion between Thunder and the family he had helped save. Thunder's reaction to meeting baby Thomas was extraordinary. The massive stallion approached the infant with incredible gentleness, lowering his head so carefully that observers held their breath. When Thunder gently sniffed the baby's blanket, little Thomas opened his eyes and seemed to focus on the horses, face with a remarkable clarity for such a young infant. "Look at that," Emma whispered in amazement. "It's like Thomas recognizes Thunder somehow. He's usually fussy with strangers, but he's completely calm with Thunder." Sarah watched the interaction with tears in her eyes, understanding that she was witnessing something truly special. The bond between Thunder and Emma had somehow extended to include her newborn son, creating a connection that defied easy explanation. "Thunder knows this baby is important," Sarah observed. "Look how carefully he's positioning himself. He's being even more gentle than he is with children during ceremonial events." The visit was documented by photographers and journalists, but the most meaningful moment came when Emma presented Thunder with a special gift. A small blanket embroidered with "Thank you for saving us both," signed with Thomas's tiny HNDPRINT. Thunder seemed to understand the significance of the gift, nuzzling the blanket gently before allowing it to be placed in his stall. From that day forward, the blanket became one of Thunder's most treasured possessions, and he would often rest his head near it during quiet moments. 6 months later, Thunder was formally recognized by the royal family during the annual trooping. The color ceremony. His Majesty the King personally presented Thunder with a special medal, recognizing his exceptional service in protecting subjects of the crown. The ceremony was watched by millions of people around the world. During the presentation, Sarah rode Thunder with pride as the stallion received recognition from the highest levels of government. Thunder's composure during the ceremony was perfect, but those who knew him well could see the quiet dignity in his bearing as he accepted the honor. Emma and baby Thomas attended the ceremony as special guests, watching from the royal box as Thunder received his medal. Baby Thomas, now 6 months old and growing strong, seemed fascinated by the sight of his equine. Protector in full ceremonial dress, the story of Thunder's heroism became part of cavalry training curriculum, used to teach new recruits about the importance of trusting their horse's instincts and maintaining the special bond between rider and mount that made such extraordinary actions possible. Sarah was promoted to captain partly based on her exemplary handling of the emergency situation and her partnership with Thunder. She often spoke at military academies about the lessons learned from Thunder's heroic actions, emphasizing how animals could teach humans about service, instinct, and compassion. Thunder continued his regular duties with the household cavalry, but he was forever changed by his experience with Emma and Thomas. The stallion seemed more attuned to human emotions and more protective of vulnerable individuals encountered during patrols. Emma established a small scholarship fund for veterinary students funded through donations from people inspired by Thunder's story. She wanted to ensure that future generations of animal doctors would be trained to recognize and appreciate the remarkable healing power that animals could provide to humans in crisis. On Thomas's first birthday, Emma brought him back to visit Thunder one final time before the family moved to start a new life in another city. The toddler was now walking and babbling, and his first clear words spoken in Thunder's presence was "horse," followed immediately by what sounded remarkably like thunder. As the years passed, Thunder aged gracefully, eventually retiring from active duty to become a training horse for young cavalry officers. His story was told and retold, inspiring new generations of riders to trust their mounts and appreciate the incredible intelligence and compassion that horses could display. Sarah, now a major, remained Thunder's primary caretaker throughout his retirement. Every year on the anniversary of the day he saved Emma and Thomas, she would take Thunder to visit the bench by the Serpentine where it all began, allowing him to remember the moment when his instincts and courage had made all the difference. Thomas. Thunder Clark grew up knowing the complete story of how he got his unusual middle name. Emma made sure he understood that he owed his life to the bravery and intuition of a remarkable horse who had refused to ignore a mother and baby in danger. Thunder passed away peacefully at the age of 23, surrounded by Sarah and the other cavalry officers who had been touched by his extraordinary life. His grave marker at the cavalry cemetery read simply, "Thunder, hero, guardian, friend." He proved that true nobility comes from serving others without expecting recognition or reward. The legacy of Thunder's heroism lived on in the countless people who had been inspired by his story. The training programs that taught others to trust their animals' instincts, most importantly, in the healthy young man named Thomas who existed, because a horse had refused to ignore a pregnant woman's cry for help.